right, everyone, we are back with another Ramped Careers Daily Update. Today, I am joined with both co-founders, Mitch and Manoj. Guys, how you doing?
Well, Danny, what's up?
I'm good.
Good. Taco Tuesday. We're feeling good. We're feeling good over here. So today we want to continue our discussion on how to answer interview questions that will come up in nearly every SDR interview, SDR, ADR, BDR interview. So the one we want to tackle today is a question you will get undoubtedly at the end of every interview. What questions do you have for me? Manoj, I know you wanted to discuss how this plays out or what they're really asking. What do you got for us?
Yeah, when I ask that question when I'm on the other side of the table, my perspective has always been two things. One, I genuinely want to give additional information or provide more color where it doesn't exist today, right? So if a candidate wants to know a little more about things that they may not know about, I'm genuinely interested in sharing information with them. And the reason is, this person has taken some time to go through the interview process. They deserve to learn as much as they possibly can, right? And so that's a baseline starting point. Another reason why I asked that question is I'm still evaluating whether this particular candidate would be a good fit for the company. And it's an opportunity for me to glean whether the candidate has put in a little bit of thought. Like, have they done some research? What are the types of questions they're asking, especially if it's for a sales role, right, or an entry-level sales role? You want them to ask questions. That is going to be part of what they do when they do end up starting a job and having conversations with prospects. You want to ask thoughtful questions, and the quality of questions that you ask is vastly pegged to the level of research you've done and the amount of thought you put into it. Because otherwise you'll just ask bland questions, right? The yes or no questions, things that you can find on the internet. So I'm also kind of teasing for that, right? Is this person really interested in it? How are they thinking? What are the types of questions they're asking me? And then from a candidate's perspective, you're still interviewing the company to some extent. You're still deciding as a candidate whether you want to spend the next 6 to 12 months to 18 to 24, whatever it is, however long you want to be there. You're still kind of figuring that out. And so the only way you'll learn more about what the reality is about the industry, the product, not when it comes to things that you don't know about, you're only going to get a pulse of it by asking them a question, right? And that's your chance to evaluate the company. And so it's an important part of the interview process from both the candidate's perspective and also the employer's perspective. But again, to summarize, I'm looking to genuinely, answer questions, but more importantly, I'm trying to get a pulse of multiple things. Are they really interested in this role? Have they done any research? What types of questions are they asking? Why are they asking these questions? Because all of this will inform whether, this is a person that'll be a good fit.
And it's also such a good opportunity as a candidate to get into a real conversation with the interviewee, right? Or with the interviewer, right? Because a lot of times the whole interview process can feel one-sided and you're just fielding questions and everyone says, well, how do I make it more conversational? Well, when you get into this kind of Q&A portion, you can really start to engage them and have a conversation about questions that you have and about the company and about the product. And then, like Manoj said, that just demonstrates that you as an interviewee have put in your homework and you've done your research and you know a little bit, enough of what the company does to have an intelligent conversation. But one thing that matters immensely here is context when you ask these questions and who you're asking these questions to. Because in most interviews, there's going to be multiple rounds, multiple stages of interviewers. You're going to start with a recruiter who may or may not know much about the role that you're interviewing for. You're going to move to some sort of, frontline manager, maybe then the second, third line manager after that. If it's a small startup, you might end up talking to CEO at some point. You want to make sure that you're tailoring your questions to the proper interview stage. So you're not going to be asking salary related questions on your first call with the manager. That's a little inappropriate. And then you're also going to make sure that you tailor your questions to the audience. So if you're talking with the CEO of the company, you're not going to be asking them day-to-day tactical, sales SDR type questions, but you then could have a conversation with the CEO about the company vision, where they're taking it, and their latest round of funding, certain high-level strategic type questions. So we'll get into this, I think, in a moment here, but make sure you're tailoring these types of questions to the stage of the interview you're at and the actual interviewer that you're speaking with. And then one other thing that always comes up is someone might say, hey, I'm out of questions. I've asked all my questions on my last call, but I'm speaking with someone new. I don't have anything else to ask. You can recycle your questions. They don't know what you asked on your last call. And in fact, it's good to ask some questions over again. You might get a slightly different answer, and that may be telling about the company. Maybe you ask a culture question to the SDR manager, ask the exact same question to his boss and see what he comes back with, he or she, because they might give you a different answer and it might tell you something that you didn't know before. But let's dig into some examples here. Danny, maybe you would start us off with some of the types of questions that you might be asking, let's say for an early interview type situation.
Yeah, so good thoughts, both of you. I think both are certainly true. You need to tailor to your audience from a high level. We know what they're asking now. So one question that I love asking, I love hearing on every single interview, you can ask it across the board, is what do you love about working at company X? And I think this is an easy one, right? It's something that is not often asked, but it's an easy one to just get a general feel about what everybody at the company is thinking and feeling about working at their specific company. I think you'll get a wide range of answers too. And you'll also get to gut check on if people actually like working there. I have seen in some interviews where the company representative says some pretty damning stuff about the specific company and it goes a little south. So you will get a good pulse check. The other thing I would do is I would make sure to research every single interviewer that you're meeting with. Come up with one very specific question about their background. So an example here is if you know the head of recruiting was in sales previous to recruiting and spent some time in the sales role and then transitioned out into her recruiting role or his recruiting role, I would make sure to ask about their transition. Something like, hey, talk to me about the transition you made from sales into recruiting. What do you like about it? What's different about it? So that shows that you've not only done your research, but that you're curious and interested in the individual. Again, this is a conversation. It's a two-way conversation. It's not just them firing questions at you. This is your opportunity to make it a really two-sided flow and ask questions of them. One question that I like specifically in sales that you can ask to almost everybody, but could be tailored more specifically to the manager, hiring manager, or VP of sales is, tell me about the team. How many folks are hitting their target or their quota? This will give you a good understanding on if it's attainable across the team for folks to actually hit their target and if this job is going to be reasonable for you to come in and hit your target as well. I kind of jumped around a little bit. Guys, what other examples do you like?
Let's go back to the individual type questions, right? Because let's face it, everyone loves talking about themselves. And sometimes, folks ask us, hey, is it appropriate to ask somebody about their background? I'm saying, heck yes. Like people love to tell you about their story. So I love your example there, Danny, about asking them about their background. A lot of times the people that you'll be talking with may have climbed the ranks through the org, ask them about that. Hey, I saw that you came on as a intern and now you're an account executive. Tell me, why have you been here for 4 years? Tell me about your journey. How did you work through the ranks? What can someone like myself do coming in as an SDR to follow a similar path as you? People love talking about that. And then when you're thinking about the team type oriented questions, I think you had a great question there, Danny, about the team. I always also like to ask about the turnover on the team, right? Maybe this is a slightly later stage interview question as you start to build rapport there, but understanding how many folks, come and go, what are they hiring, what's the hiring needs look like coming up, just so you can get a feel for, again, is it a stable type environment? Are people leaving because they're not hitting? Are they leaving because there's no product market fit? Or, is everybody staying on board and everyone's getting promoted 18 to 24 months into the role?
More questions around the product and service too, right? Again, demonstrates that you have some interest and you've done a little bit of homework. So I think you should, to the extent possible, ask questions around what makes their product or service special. Why do customers choose you over some of the competitors? And you should list out some of the competitors because you've done your research and you know who their most common competitors are. So ask them, why would customers pick you or somebody else? Or if folks have picked somebody else over you, what is the reason? Why does your best customer choose to stay with you? Customers that churn, why do they churn? What do you plan on adding in terms of a feature set over the course of the next 12 months? And what does that really mean in terms of market share for us? Those are questions that really would demonstrate that you've done some homework, you're interested about it. Same goes with the industry, right? What industry trends do you see? Are we aligned with it? Do you see any headwinds? Do you see any tailwinds? Ask them these questions. I think it's important. Even if you're interviewing for a frontline sales development, business development role, at the end of the day, you're still selling a product or service. And the more thoughtful and well-researched you are, better this interview will be because it'll quickly become a conversation and less so Q&A session, which I guess gets back to the last point, Danny. What are your thoughts on how to ask questions? I know we've done a bit of storytelling on how to answer questions, but you agree with this. Asking questions is an art form in and of itself. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so generally speaking, I think a rule of thumb here that you can that you can apply broadly is asking open-ended questions. So these are not questions like, are you in charge of X? Do you like working at Y, right? Because they can answer that with a yes or a no. So open-ended questions are the way to go specifically here. The other way I like to, if you find yourself getting into the motion of just asking a question or you didn't write it down by accident to just ask a question, you can always say something like, tell me about. You can start a question with a tell me about your experience, tell me about the team, tell me about the culture there. That's like an easy mental switch to just have in your arsenal when you do feel like you're just maybe on autopilot asking questions in the conversation. So just switch out of do you, are you to tell me about, broad-based, how are, what are, why are. Those are generally the questions are the starters to questions that I would ask.
And then two other things there is, reference something that the interviewer said earlier in the conversation. If you have a question about it, hey, you mentioned this earlier, I was curious to learn a little bit more about that. That shows that you're actively listening. And then the second piece is, like Manoj said earlier, demonstrate that you did your homework. Hey, I was looking up this competitor earlier, or I was doing some research on your website. It looks like your 3 main value props are X, Y, and Z. How do you convey that over a cold call, right? Show them that you did your research. This is a way for you to demonstrate that you're actually interested. You get them further down the conversation so that you can actually have a meaningful conversation, not starting from the ground floor there.
That makes sense. And I'll add one practical example just to get a better pulse of exactly what we're trying to say here. If you are trying to learn about advancement opportunities within the company for yourself, poor question to ask is, are there opportunities for me to move up the ranks of this company? It's a terrible question to ask because it's a yes or no question, and it's unlikely anyone would say no. Slightly better way of asking the same question is, if I wanted to become an AE in the next year, what should I do? Slightly better, not yes or no, but it still doesn't give the opportunity to the employer or whoever is interviewing you to come up with a story. They're going to list out some things, characteristics, attributes, which may not be indicative of what you really need to do. A better way of asking the same question is straight up asking them the best SDR that you've ever had. That's the better way of asking the same advancement question, because now you're going to get the qualities and attributes that you're looking for out of their mouths, but they're using a real life example to recall their memory. They're going to think fondly of an SDR that they've had a good experience with. And that's a much better way of asking that same question. And so follow that framework and use that example, however it may be helpful, to think about every other question that you ask, because these are 3 different questions that all get to the same thing, but you may end up having a very different conversation based on what of those 3 questions you ask.
Cool. Well, that's a great place to leave it, Manoj. We've covered a ton today. We have strategies to ask questions, strategies for what questions you should be asking, and strategies to combat, and a better understanding of why the question is asked in the first place. So we'll leave it at there. We'll tackle another question tomorrow. But for today, this has been Mitch and Manoj and Danny with another Ramp Careers Daily Update. Thanks, everybody.